The Detroit Lions entered this offseason in a position that feels unfamiliar compared to the energy surrounding this team just a year ago. Expectations are higher now. The margin for error is thinner, and every roster decision carries significantly more weight. And yet, what we've seen so far from General Manager Brad Holmes is something that has sparked debate across the fan base. A quiet free agency period, conservative spending, short-term deals, calculated risks. It's a philosophy that has worked in building this roster, but now the question shifts from building to sustaining, and that is an entirely different challenge. Everyone is talking about defensive end, and rightfully so. The departure of Josh Paschal leaves a glaring hole, not just in terms of production, but in rotational depth. But if you zoom out and really analyze this roster, the defensive line issue is just one piece of a much broader structural concern. This defense, as currently constructed, is walking into the 2026 season with multiple pressure points that could define the trajectory of the entire year. Let's start in the middle of that defense, because the linebacker situation may quietly be one of the most important unresolved issues on this roster. The loss of Alex Anzalone is not just about replacing a starter. It's about replacing a signal caller, a communicator, a tone setter. Linebackers in this scheme are not just tacklers. They are responsible for aligning the defense, adjusting to motion, diagnosing plays before they unfold. That kind of role cannot simply be filled by plugging in the next name on the depth chart. There is optimism around Malcolm Rodriguez, but it's cautious optimism at best. Coming off a subpar 2025 season and still dealing with the aftermath of a previous ACL injury, expecting him to step in as a full-time, high-level starter feels like a gamble. Then there's Derek Barnes, who has flashed potential but has yet to prove he can consistently anchor a unit. This is where the Lions' current approach becomes risky. They are relying on internal development in a position group that traditionally benefits from veteran stability. And that brings us to the type of players the Lions should be targeting. A name like Logan Wilson makes sense not because he's flashy, but because he brings experience, reliability, and strong run defense. Someone like Amon-Ra offers a different kind of value, particularly on special teams, which has quietly been a priority for this roster. But regardless of the specific name, the strategy should be clear. This team needs competition at linebacker. Not depth for the sake of depth, but legitimate competition that forces the best version of whoever wins that job. Now shift your focus to the interior defensive line, where things look stable on the surface, but become much more concerning the deeper you go. Alim McNeill and Tyleik Williams provide a strong foundation. That's not the issue. The issue is what happens behind them. The loss of Roy Lopez was unexpected and, frankly, impactful. He wasn't a star, but he played a critical role in maintaining rotational balance, especially against the run. Right now, the Lions are dangerously thin at nose tackle. Chris Smith is the only in-house option, and he has primarily been a practice squad player. That's not a sustainable plan for a team with playoff ambitions. Bringing back DJ Reader would be the simplest solution, but age and contract demands complicate that scenario. This is where someone like Greg Gaines becomes interesting. There's familiarity there from Holmes' time with the Rams, and more importantly, he fits the mold of a cost-effective, rotational player who can hold his ground in the middle. The deeper issue here is philosophical. The Lions are building a defense that relies heavily on rotation and physicality up front. That system only works if you have depth. Without it, fatigue sets in, gaps widen, and suddenly a strength becomes a vulnerability. That's why this position cannot be ignored, even if it doesn't generate headlines. Now let's talk about the secondary, because this is where things get even more complex. The addition of Christian Izien is one of those moves that doesn't dominate the news cycle, but could end up playing a significant role in how this defense functions early in the season. On paper, it's a low-risk, one-year deal. In reality, it's a patch for a unit dealing with uncertainty across multiple levels. The situation surrounding Terrion Arnold adds an unpredictable layer. Then you factor in the departure of Amik Robertson, and suddenly the nickel position becomes a question mark. At safety, injuries to Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch create even more instability. This is not a secondary that can afford to take a wait-and-see approach. This is where Izien's versatility becomes critical. He's not being brought in to be a star. He's being brought in to stabilize chaos. He can line up in the slot, drop back into free safety, or even contribute in the box. That kind of flexibility is incredibly valuable in a defense that may need to shuffle personnel week to week. But there's a difference between being versatile and being dependable as a full-time starter, and that's where the concern lies. At this point in the script, if you're looking at this Lions roster and wondering whether this conservative approach is the right move for a team with championship aspirations, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because we're breaking down not just what the Lions are doing, but what it means for their Super Bowl window. Back to Izien. The reality is that his performance will likely depend on how much is asked of him. If he's playing a rotational role, filling gaps, and contributing on special teams, this signing could be a quiet success. But if injuries force him into extended starting duty, his limitations in coverage and tackling could become a problem. His career production shows flashes, including early interceptions that highlight his instincts, but consistency has not been his strength. What stands out, however, is his path to the league. An undrafted player who earned a starting role early in his career speaks to his work ethic and adaptability. Those are traits this Lions coaching staff values deeply. And in a locker room that prides itself on grit and development, Izien fits the culture, even if he doesn't fully solve the talent concerns. Zooming out again, the overarching theme of this offseason becomes clear. The Lions are betting on continuity, internal growth, and strategic depth additions rather than splashy signings. Players like Cade Mays, Teddy Bridgewater, Isaiah Pacheco, and Tyler Conklin reinforce the offensive side with stability and depth. That side of the ball feels largely accounted for, assuming health and expected development. But defense wins in January. And right now, this defense feels incomplete. The Lions don't need to panic, but they do need to act with purpose. Linebacker depth, interior defensive line rotation, and secondary stability are not luxury additions. They are essential pieces that will determine whether this team can withstand the inevitable challenges of an NFL season. Injuries will happen. Slumps will occur. The question is whether the roster is built to absorb those moments without collapsing. As the draft approaches, the Lions still have opportunities to address these concerns. But relying solely on rookies to fill critical gaps is a dangerous game, especially for a team with legitimate championship expectations. Free agency is where you add certainty. The draft is where you add upside. Right now, Detroit still needs more certainty. And this is where the next few moves from Brad Holmes will define not just this offseason, but potentially the entire season. Because the difference between a good team and a great team often comes down to depth, flexibility, and the ability to adapt when things don't go according to plan. If you've made it this far and you're as invested in the Lions' future as it looks, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because as more moves happen and the roster takes shape, we'll be breaking down every decision, every impact, and what it means for Detroit's path to a championship.